Welcome to another deep dive with my mind mashups. Ever wonder if those ancient stories, about gods walking the earth, about where humans came from, what if they were more than just myths? Names like Anunnaki, Sumer, they hint at something. Well, something else entirely, maybe.
It's a fascinating thread, isn't it? It connects, literally connects our oldest written records with some really out there modern theories that are still debated today.
Exactly. And that's what we're getting into right now, the Anunnaki. We're going to look at who they were in the original stories, the ancient lore, then see how that whole idea got, completely reimagined, and finally think about why this idea of them returning seems to pop up now. What does that say about us?
Right, we've pulled together quite a range of stuff for this. The actual ancient texts, academic viewpoints, modern theories themselves, and even reports looking at society today.
Yeah.
The plan is to really unpack it all, pull out the key bits so you can get a handle on this story that just keeps evolving, From Mesopotamia thousands of years ago right up to today's worries.
Okay, so get comfortable, let's get curious. Time to dig into this amazing history and its modern echoes.
So let's start way back. Mesopotamia, cradle civilization stuff. The Anunnaki, historically speaking, they were a major group of gods worshipped by the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, basically the big players back then.
So top-tier deities, the main gods.
Pretty much, yeah, part of the divine council.
Yeah.
The name itself, Anunnaki, is generally thought to mean something like princely offspring, or maybe those of royal blood, possibly descendants of An, the sky god, and Ki, the earth goddess. Some big names associated with them are Enlil, who kind of becomes the boss god, and Enki, or Ea, as the Akkadians called him, the god of wisdom, water, magic, a very important figure. And Inanna, or Ishtar, the goddess of Venus, she shows up a lot too.
Okay, so what were they actually doing in those really old stories?
Well, in the early Sumerian stuff, like post-Akkadian period texts, their main job was huge. They decree the fates. They're described as these powerful gods up in the heavens, meeting in this divine assembly, making all the big decisions about the cosmos, about life on Earth. They were the ultimate authority, setting the order of things.
But it wasn't always that straightforward, was it? Like, mythologies change over time.
That's a really key point. It wasn't one single story set in stone. While those early texts have them as fate deciders in the sky, later Akkadian texts think Epic of Gilgamesh, or the story of Inanna going down to the underworld. They paint a different picture. Suddenly, the Anunnaki are these 7 imposing judges down in the underworld, judging the dead.
From sky gods to underworld judges.
Exactly. It shows how these beliefs weren't static, They evolved over hundreds, thousands of years, shaped by different empires, different cultures mixing, new ideas coming in. It reminds us we're dealing with dynamic stories, not just like one factual report.
And a huge part of that lore is the creation of humans. Where does that fit in with the Anunnaki in the original text?
Yeah, the Atrahasis epic is crucial here. It basically says humanity was created because the gods had a major labor problem, a crisis. The Igigi gods, often seen as the younger gods, they were stuck doing all the really hard work, digging rivers, shaping the land. It was backbreaking stuff. And after 40 days, they just had enough.
So like the gods went on strike.
You could totally see it that way. They were worn out, miserable, and they rebelled. So Enki, the clever one, comes up with this plan. Let's make a new creature, humans, to do the heavy lifting. The texts talk about using divine clay, mixed with the blood or essence of a sacrificed god, sometimes named Gestu. And that sacrifice is what gave humans their intelligence, their spark.
So the key idea from those ancient texts is humans were made to be workers for the gods, taking over their chores, not, say, digging for gold or something.
Precisely. That's the absolute core takeaway from the original sources. The whole point was to lighten the gods' workload, keep creation running smoothly. There's no mention of mining precious metals. That original motive is really, really different from some of the stuff we hear later.
And these old stories, they didn't just disappear, right? You see echoes of them later on.
Oh, definitely. Scholars point out some really strong parallels between these Mesopotamian myths and stories in the Hebrew Bible Genesis, especially the creation and the flood story. The Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, has bits that sound a lot like Genesis, starting with watery chaos, then creating light, heavens, humans. It's less about direct copying, more about how powerful stories traveled and were adapted across the ancient Near East. These narratives were just too good to disappear. They got reshaped over time. Understanding that helps us see how the Anunnaki story itself could keep changing, even up to now.
Which brings us right up to the modern day, and this huge shift in how the Anunnaki are seen. The whole ancient astronaut idea. How on earth did we jump from Mesopotamian gods to aliens?
Right, well that jump is mostly down to one guy, Zecharia Sitchin. Starting around the mid-20th century, he really pushed this ancient astronaut hypothesis. His big series of books, kicking off with the 12th planet in 1976, made this really controversial claim. Sumerian myths aren't myths, they're history. Records of actual aliens visiting Earth.
And his books sold millions, didn't they? Translated everywhere, even though academics weren't exactly convinced.
Weren't exactly convinced is putting it mildly. Widespread academic rejection is more like it right from the start. But anyway, the absolute cornerstone of his whole theory is Nibiru.
Nibiru, right, the mystery planet.
Sitchin claimed Nibiru was this undiscovered planet way out past Neptune, and that's where the Anunnaki came from. He said it had this crazy long elliptical orbit, 3,600 years, that brought it swinging near Earth periodically. He even tried to link its gravity to weird things about Pluto's orbit.
Okay, but what do actual astronomers say about planet Nibiru?
They say, no, just no. There's zero astronomical evidence, no gravitational pull detected, nothing to suggest a big planet like that exists with that kind of orbit. Plus, the whole idea that the Sumerians who knew the 5 planets you can see with your naked eye somehow knew about a 12th planet, including the Sun, Moon, and Nibiru. It just doesn't line up with any historical or astronomical facts.
Okay, setting the science aside just for a second. In Sitchin's version, when did these Anunnaki supposedly show up, and why did he say they came?
He put their arrival way back, like 450,000 years ago. And his reason, totally different from the ancient texts. He said they came here to mine gold, specifically in Africa. He argued they needed gold dust to patch up the atmosphere on Nibiru, which was apparently failing.
Hold up, back to that key point from the old text. You said those stories mentioned the gods needing relief from labor, like digging rivers. Sitchin swaps that for gold mining. That's a massive change. The ancient texts didn't mention gold.
Not in this context, no. Let's be super clear. The original Sumerian and Akkadian sources never mention gold mining as the reason the Anunnaki were here or why humans were made. That gold motive, that's pure Sitchin. It's a modern invention that fits our world. Right? It gives a material, resource-based reason for aliens coming here that sounds more, I don't know, scientific or understandable to us today than just needing help with divine chores.
So in Sitchin's telling, they needed gold, their own alien workers supposedly rebelled, and then came humans.
That's his narrative. He reimagines the Igigi not as younger gods, but as the Anunnaki's own grunt workers who mutinied because mining was so awful. So facing this labor problem, Enki again finds a solution. But this time, forget clay. Sitchin says it was advanced genetic engineering. He claimed the Anunnaki took their own DNA and mixed it with early humans like Homo erectus to basically engineer Homo sapiens as a slave race, purpose-built for the gold mines. See how it takes the ancient myth and overlays it with modern sci-fi ideas and economic motives, turning it into this kind of pseudo-history?
He didn't stop there either, did he? He had theories about civilization itself.
Oh yeah. Sitchin claimed the Anunnaki basically jump-started Sumerian civilization, gave them knowledge, set up kingship as a way to rule through human intermediaries, hence the divine right of kings. He even claimed the destruction of the city of around 2000 BCE, which ancient texts lament, was caused by nuclear fallout from a war between Anunnaki factions. He interpreted descriptions of an evil wind as, like, literal radioactive fallout.
It's definitely a story that grabs you. But what's the academic consensus on all this? The historians, the archaeologists?
Like we said, it's overwhelmingly rejected. Mainstream scientists, historians, experts in Sumerian language and culture, Near Eastern scholars, they basically all categorize Sitchin's work as pseudoscience or pseudo-history.
What are the main reasons, the big criticisms?
They're pretty fundamental. His translations are a huge issue. Critics say he completely misinterpreted Sumerian words like taking di-ir, which means god or divine, and claiming it meant pure ones of the blazing rockets. That's just not linguistically sound, according to experts. His science, especially about Nibiru, is flat out wrong based on what we know. Then there's the problem of taking these complex, evolving myths and treating them as literal, factual history. And finally, accusations that he cherry-picked bits that fit his theory and ignored everything that didn't.
So scientifically, historically, Sitchin's Anunnaki theory is pretty much debunked. And yet, it hangs around. It has this dedicated following. It pops up in movies, games. What does that persistence tell us?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it? Even with solid academic pushback, these ideas strike a chord with millions. You see echoes in things like the movie Stargate and video games all over the internet, sometimes even tied into weird political or New Age beliefs. I think it shows something deep about us, that constant search for answers about where we came from, that hunger for a big story, and maybe a willingness to embrace ideas outside the mainstream. especially if they offer a sense of secret knowledge or uncovering a hidden truth, even if the evidence is shaky.
Which kind of brings us to now. Why does this idea of the Anunnaki returning, this external force intervening, seem to resonate with some people today? It feels like it's tapping into something more current than just ancient aliens.
I think you're absolutely right. Our sources really point towards the modern appeal of an Anunnaki return, being tied up with some pretty deep anxieties and, frankly, a lot of disillusionment with the way things are right now. You see this particularly, though, not only within parts of the American working class.
Can you unpack that link a bit? What kind of anxieties are we talking about?
Well, sources describe a huge chunk of the population, especially people without four-year college degrees. That's almost 2/3 of the workforce in the U.S. facing real economic struggles. It's a diverse group, for sure, but common themes emerge. Low pay, higher unemployment than graduates, lots of unstable service jobs.
And the bigger economic picture isn't exactly rosy for many folks either.
No, it's not. The U.S. has really high income inequality compared to other developed countries, even after taxes and social programs are factored in. The stats are pretty stark. Sources mention things like the lowest 20% of households having an average income around $15,000, while the top 20% pull in over $280,000. The top 1% making something like 30 times what the middle group makes. And this isn't just numbers. Sources talk about it having a real life and death impact working class people living on average 7 years less than the wealthy. That constant stress of just trying to make ends meet, it fuels anxiety, impacts health.
So money is a big part of it. What else? Social stuff. Political.
Yeah, there's also this reported deep sense of feeling disconnected, alienated. Many non-college folks say they don't have close friends. They're participating less in community life. Think about the decline of things like unions, the rise of gig work. Those old social supports are weaker. Then add the physical toll of many jobs, difficulty accessing things like transport or healthcare. It builds this strong feeling of being shut out, forgotten by the system.
And meanwhile, trust in the institutions that are supposed to help, that seems to be tanking.
Critically low, yeah. Public trust in the federal government has been dropping for ages. Sources say only about 22% of Americans trust the government to do the right thing most of the time. Most people believe the government favors specific groups, ignores ordinary people, wastes the money.
Okay, so you've got economic pain, social isolation, political distrust. It sounds like the perfect breeding ground for stories offering radical change.
Exactly. When the current system feels broken, like it offers no real future, especially for younger people. Remember Occupy Wall Street highlighting that wealth gap. And when the political system itself gets described by some analysts as basically an oligarchy where average people have almost zero influence, well, then the idea of some massive shakeup, even something as drastic as an alien invasion, can start to sound maybe not desirable, but appealing. Not necessarily out of fear, but maybe out of a desperate hope that anything would be better, that some outside force might just reset the board.
So the appeal isn't really about believing Sitchin's specific story, but more about the narrative itself, the idea of an outside force fixing things.
That's what the analysis suggests, yeah. The narrative offers a kind of cosmic justice. It presents this powerful external entity that could theoretically sweep in, fix the injustices, tear down the system that feels rigged, and free people from what feels like a modern kind of enslavement, not to literal aliens in minds, but to an economic and political setup that just isn't working for them. It taps into that deep desire for real, fundamental change when the usual paths, voting, protesting, seem blocked or useless.
That really reframes the whole modern fascination. Okay, so playing devil's advocate here. If we run with this idea based on these narratives and anxieties, what might an Anunnaki return actually look like? What are the possibilities?
Oh, it's a massive spectrum. A real Pandora's box, like you said. It all hinges on basically two things. Are they friendly or not?
Yeah.
And just how advanced are they really?
Let's start with the optimistic side. What if they were benevolent?
Well, a positive contact scenario could mean incredible leaps forward for us. Imagine an advanced civilization sharing knowledge, maybe breakthroughs in physics, clean energy, new materials, cures for diseases. It could help us tackle huge global problems like climate change or resource scarcity. Their tech could spark, a resource revolution, let us build infrastructure for the stars, create whole new industries we can't even conceive of now.
And culturally, philosophically,
potentially transformative. Meeting a truly different intelligence could force us to rethink everything, shatter our human-centric view of the universe, give us a totally new perspective on our place in things. It might inspire new art, new ways of thinking, maybe even better social models. Globally, it could unite us, make us drop petty conflicts and focus on shared challenges, maybe even join some kind of galactic community.
How would people react? psychologically?
It's interesting. Some studies looking into potential reactions suggest people might actually handle the news, "We're not alone," surprisingly well. More curiosity than mass panic, perhaps, especially if it's presented as a scientific discovery. There's also the argument, that any civilization capable of interstellar travel must have outgrown its own violent tendencies. They might be more like cosmic researchers than conquerors of cosmic Charles Darwin, as one source put it.
Okay, but that's the best case scenario. What about the flip side? The dangers?
The downside is, frankly, terrifying. It could mirror the worst parts of our own history. Think colonial encounters a technologically superior force just steamrolling a less advanced one. The Columbian Exchange is often brought up. Even unintentional things like alien germs we have no immunity to could be devastating.
Or it could be deliberate. Conquest, exploitation.
Absolutely. That's the big fear. Technological dominance leading to exploitation. They might want Earth's resources, see humans as pests or potential slaves, or just wipe us out if we're in the way. The economic chaos alone would be staggering, a great restructuring. All resources might shift to defense. Markets could crash. Industries vanish overnight. Human workers. Maybe massive unemployment, wage suppression. It could be like a new mercantile colonialism. Earth just becomes a resource colony or a captive market.
And the psychological toll of that kind of scenario?
Devastating. Finding out we're massively inferior could cause a species-wide identity crisis, deep feelings of inadequacy. If they just give us knowledge, does our own science and art wither? Religions built on human uniqueness would face huge challenges. That could lead to social breakdown. Cultural identities might dissolve. On a personal level, especially if contact is hostile, you can see widespread paranoia, trauma, PTSD, maybe echoing some of those fringe alien abduction accounts.
Politically, it sounds unmanageable. How would governments even deal with a superior entity?
Immense struggle. It could instantly trigger a new, desperate arms race if they're seen as a threat. We have no agreed-upon protocols for first contact, so imagine the chaos nations acting alone, maybe trying to cut secret deals leading to exploitation. And who would accept alien rulers? They'd have no legitimacy, likely sparking massive resistance, just like historical occupations. Plus, look at how governments handle UAPs. Now, the lack of transparency already breeds distrust in conspiracy theories. Actual contact would amplify that intensely.
Wow. So this story that started with ancient Mesopotamian gods got twisted by Sitchin into gold mining aliens. It leads to these potential futures that are either unbelievably good or unbelievably bad.
It really shows how flexible a narrative can be, right? How it absorbs and reflects not just old ideas, but our deepest hopes and fears about what might be coming.
And it's so clear how that modern version, even with all its flaws, connects directly to what's happening now. The economic stress, the feeling of being disconnected, that deep distrust in the system.
Totally. It shows how these old frameworks, even when radically changed, can give people a language to talk about feeling exploited or left behind today. Those two extremes we talked about, utopia or catastrophe, they really just map onto our fundamental hopes and fears when facing the powerful unknown.
So in the end, this whole fascination with the Anunnaki, whether ancient gods or modern aliens, it seems like it tells us way more about us than it does about them.
I think that's exactly right. It taps into that enduring human quest for meaning, for a grand story of origins, and maybe that deep-seated, sometimes desperate hope for some kind of salvation or radical change when things feel broken, whether it's ancient gods demanding labor or modern systems failing people.
So the Anunnaki story, in all its versions, it's like holding up a mirror. What does their potential arrival, whether real or just imagined, really tell us about who we are and where we fit in this huge universe?
That's definitely something to chew on.
And that's our journey for this deep dive, tracing these threads from ancient myths to modern anxieties, using all the sources we could gather. Thanks for coming along with us to explore this really complex topic.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to get into these stories that span such huge amounts of time and really make you think.
We hope you keep mulling over that last question. And hey, if you found this interesting, please do like, subscribe, or follow My Mind Mashups wherever you get your podcasts or videos. You can find My Mind Mashups on Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something else just as intriguing.